That is the idea of putting a cap on the number of international students. The federal housing minister.
In this video, we will be talking about the hot topic that has been making headlines in Canada recently. The federal government's proposal to limit the number of international students coming to the country. This is a huge issue that affects not only the students themselves, but also the universities, the economy, and the society as a whole. Canada is known for being one of the most welcoming and diverse countries in the world, especially when it comes to immigration and education. Every year, hundreds of thousands of international students choose Canada as their destination to pursue their academic dreams and career goals. In fact, in 2022, Canada accepted a record number of international students, more than 800,000, a 75% increase from 5 years ago. These students bring many benefits to Canada, such as enriching the cultural diversity, boosting the innovation and research capacity, and contributing to the economic growth and job creation. However, they also pose some challenges, especially in terms of housing affordability. Canada is facing a severe housing crisis, as the demand for housing far exceeds the supply. The average home price in Canada was around $750,000 as of August 2023. That represents an increase of 360% from the year 2002. The issue is especially acute in large cities like Toronto and Vancouver, where houses now typically sell for more than $1 million. Rent is also becoming more expensive in Canada's major cities. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Toronto is $2,500, a 25% increase from last year. Many Canadians are struggling to pay their mortgage or rent, or are forced to move to smaller or more remote areas. This has led to growing public frustration and anger towards the government for failing to solve the housing crisis. The proposal in response to this situation, the Canadian Housing Minister Sean Fraser recently floated the idea of capping how many students Canada lets in from abroad as a way to help tackle the country's inflated housing costs.
That is the idea of putting a cap on the number of international students. The federal housing minister says this is one of the options the government needs to consider. Sean Fraser is the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. Hello, Minister.
Hey, it's good to be with you.
Glad to have you. Listen, you certainly attracted some attention when you raised the prospect of putting a cap on international students coming to Canada as a way of easing pressure on the housing market. You also, though, seem to suggest that maybe that was a premature conversation. A lot of people are going to be watching that conversation closely. What kind of timelines are we talking about here in terms of making that decision?
Well, look, I should be clear that the decision on managing the international student program will rest with my colleague, Minister Miller. But I think it's important that we're able to speak openly about the different challenges that communities are facing. Now, the international student program makes extraordinary economic and social contributions to Canada. It contributes tens of billions of dollars to our GDP annually. But what we've seen recently is there's been such rapid growth, given that the program is typically uncapped, that certain communities are having difficulties managing with the population growth that it's attracted. Of course, we still believe in the international student program, but we want to work with institutions in the communities where they exist to make sure it's being managed appropriately. It's not fair for the students who come to be exploited and left without adequate housing. There are some institutions, some private colleges that are not necessarily good actors, but I'm convinced have come to exist for the purpose of exploiting financially those international students who come to Canada. So we want to work with communities and work with institutions the same way we do on our permanent residency programs to make sure that we are growing the housing supply and equipping communities to deal with a growing population. That's just good governance.
Okay, you talk about how to make all of the pieces work here. One of the people that Cabinet heard from today was Professor Mike Moffat. He has argued that colleges and universities should be given funding to build student housing, and if they don't, that they should lose the ability to bring in international students. Would you go that far?
Look, there's different solutions that different people are pitching to help address this challenge, but I don't think anyone disagrees that we need to make sure that we're better aligning our housing, our healthcare, our industrial policy with our immigration policy. Professor Moffat has made the suggestion, as you've indicated. Others have called for a cap. Others still have argued that we should work with institutions to ensure that they're making the necessary investments, not just in housing, but to better support students in their studies and in their integration into the community as a quasi-settlement service provider. There's a number of different options that I think it's smart for us to consider, but at this stage, as we seek to address unique challenges with rapid population growth in centers that hold post-secondary institutions, we ought to consider all of the different options before we make a decision. I think it's important that we canvass the different suggestions that are being made by people who've been studying this, including Professor Moffat.
The pros. Those who support the idea of capping international students argue that it would ease some of the pressure on the housing market and make it more affordable for Canadians. They claim that international students are competing with local residents for scarce housing resources, driving up the prices and rents. Some international students are using their student visas as a backdoor to permanent residency or citizenship, which adds to the immigration backlog and undermines the integrity of the system. They say that Canada should prioritize its own citizens and residents over foreigners when it comes to access to education and housing. It is also suggests that Canada should diversify its sources of international students and attract more students from countries that have less impact on the housing market, such as Africa or Latin America. The cons. Those who oppose the idea of capping international students argue that it would be counterproductive and harmful for Canada's long-term interests. International students are not the main cause of the housing crisis, but rather a symptom of deeper structural problems, such as low supply, high demand, speculation, foreign investment, taxation, regulation, and infrastructure. Capping international students would not address these root causes, but rather create new problems, such as reducing the quality and diversity of education, harming the reputation and competitiveness of Canadian universities, losing valuable talent and skills, decreasing innovation and research output, weakening economic growth and job creation, and undermining social cohesion and multiculturalism. The impact. If Canada decides to implement a cap on international students, it would have significant implications for various groups and sectors. For international students who are already in Canada or who are planning to come to Canada, it would mean more uncertainty, anxiety, and difficulty in pursuing their academic and career aspirations. They would face more competition, higher costs, and fewer opportunities to study and work in Canada. There will be also less chance to become permanent residents or citizens of Canada, which could affect their future plans and prospects. For Canadian universities, it would mean losing a major source of revenue, reputation, and excellence. They would have to cut back on their programs, services, and staff, and lower their standards and rankings. Also, backlash from the international student community, as well as the potential lawsuits from the affected students. For the Canadian economy and society, it would mean losing a vital asset, partner, and contributor. It would reduce the human capital, innovation, and diversity that Canada needs to thrive in the globalized world. It would also damage the international relations and goodwill that Canada has built with other countries through education and immigration. What do you think about this proposal? Do you agree or disagree with it? How do you think it will affect you or someone you know? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Thank you for watching and good luck with your Canada immigration journey. Please check description below for useful links.